Hello, everyone, and welcome to this audio podcast. This audio podcast is part of a PH4 report. This audio podcast as part of a SZtorm. This audio podcast as part of a Bedlam Clobber, and this audio podcast as part of a Storm Logistics production. In this audio podcast, I sort of look at effects on behavioral roles, effects on behavioral roles, and as part of peer-reviewed and published works from 2017. So the systematic behaviors of gambling can stem from childhood maltreatment, including physical, emotional, and other forms of abuse. There have been counterproductive patterns identified in gamblers that interact with this addictive behavior. Some include coping and risk taking, and these patterns become more apparent when a person or individual is confronted with emotional distress. Both males and females differentiated emotional factors relating to the motive on gambling, but it is not transparent what the prominent emotional factors are. What is known is that males are more likely or more probable to gamble and are theoretically at higher risk of longer term issues. A works carried out by authors in 2014 identified that pathological gambling is highly associated with a prominent risk of suicidal thoughts. Its clinical indicators were those associated have been evidenced as being indicators that associated in cognitive with associated with cognitive impairment. Young people are also exposed to, gambling issues, where, uh, for example, for example, where for example young people can sort of be exposed to the sort of actions around parents and relatives and guardians, for example. And so this can have an impact on a child's health and sort of social skills. There are several motives that sort of enslave an individual to gamble, including stimulating the mind into escape, winning, coping, uh, uh, stimulating the mind into escape, winning, coping, excitement, sort of social interactions, and looking at where um, other additional motives can include financial gains, and sort of boredom alleviation. That draws this audio podcast to a close. A subsequent audio podcast in this as part of the PH4 report. We'll delve into the effects, looking at gambling and its impact, but and we'll look at more specifically in look we'll look at we'll look at effects on family. So that draws this audio podcast to a close. An audio podcast as part of a PH4 report, an audio podcast as part of a Hella Storm, an audio podcast as part of a Bedlam Clobber, and an audio podcast as part of a Storm Robotics production.